Everybody, why I think you're so great.
Well, yeah. A little bit of background. So I've been in Grosse Pointe now 4 years. I moved here from Kansas City metro area. We lived in the Northland. My wife and I moved here 4 years ago. I was working for the Children's Hospital in Michigan as their chief operating officer. Just recently went through an employer change, so I'm with Henry Ford Health now as part of their population health team and doing some innovative work that sets in between the insurance company HAP and the health system. So we have 3 growing kids that we're raising in this community. My wife and I, Lindsay, just celebrated our 16th
You should know that faster.
Well, we're past 16 now, so 16th wedding anniversary. And I have an MBA. I have a vast knowledge in finance and management, and basically I've been leading big organizations my whole career. With the change in employer, I have some time, which is always important. And really, we've been working on this for a while, and I look forward to now joining the committee and spending a little bit of that time here helping this group, helping the school district, and really contributing in any way I can. We have 3 kids, a 10th grader, a 7th grader, and a 4th grader, 2 of which are in the Grosse Pointe public school system, and I had all 3 here when we first moved here, and made some changes, but we have 1 at Pierce and 1 at Grosse Pointe South. So look forward to helping this group and contributing any way I can, and thanks for having me.
We're happy here. Go right ahead. Terry, you want to start? We'll go right around the room so Heath knows who's in.
Sure, Terry Collins, the newest trustee on the board.
Ahmed, Ismail. Oh, you know who I am.
Yes, sir.
I'm Brendan Walsh. I'm on the citizen member of the Finance and Facilities Committee. I was on the Board of Education here for 8 years.
Ryan Case, just volunteer on the committee.
Nice to meet you, Joe Parke. I'm also a volunteer on the committee.
Hi, welcome. It's nice to meet you. I'm Worden. I'm one of the trustees on the board as well.
Hi, Gary Kent. I'm with Plante Moran Rail Point. We're the owner's rep for the bond and the sinking fund programs. I'm Matteson, facilities director.
Chris Fenton, the interim superintendent.
Michael Walsh, senior manager with the audit team at Plante Moran.
He's the Vargo.
Great. Good to meet y'all.
Okay, let's move on to, anybody have any objections with the agenda? Good, I'm glad there are none. We're gonna move on to 3.1. Actually, we're gonna go to 3.2 and 3.3 so we can get
You should be.
part of Plante Moran out of here. So you want to walk through with us, please, the civil RFP for parking lots and the playground RFP?
Yeah. So we have 2 RFPs to present to you tonight.
Does everybody have copies of those, by the way? Yeah.
So I think the first one, we'll start with the playground RFP. I'll give you a little history of why we're here. Back in 2022, we received a ORC complaint from the U.S. Department of Education. After that complaint, we partnered with Clark Hill to draft a resolution. After that resolution, we partnered with a company that specializes in ADA compliancy and playground called RecWise. We used that assessment from RecWise, to draft an RFP with Plante Moran and use that as the backbone of that RFP. I've asked Gary to come here to kind of go through the bits and pieces of the RFP to give you guys more information.
Yep, so one of the first things we did was we drafted, I guess let me back up. When we met with Ben and Amanda prior to putting out this RFP, we kind of set a budget for these playground projects. Happy to report that that initial budget came in higher than what we actually needed to spend on the assessment based on that. What was the name of the company that did the report? RecWise. So we actually lowered that budget down to $525,000, which is exactly where the proposal came in at. But we reached out to about 5 different firms. We had a pre-bid meeting with 4 of those firms that jumped on the call, and ultimately we only received 1 bid for this. 2 of the firms requested a extension in the bid timeline. We thought, due to the complaints and urgency to kind of repair these playgrounds and bring them up to code for kids' plan, we bring that one proposal to the committee tonight for review. The proposal did come in at the budget that we had set, and they actually provided some alternates saying that they can come in lower than that budget, which we can work out if they are awarded the contract. They provided more equipment that was actually necessary to bring them up to code, but if they're awarded the contract and we don't want to spend all of that, we can actually lower that amount down or use that for more improvements on these playgrounds.
You could give the locations of the playground.
Yep, so the 4 playground locations are,
Harns, Monteith, Ferry, and Defer.
Okay.
So how does this interact with, if at all, the funds that PTO groups raised independently to redo recently some of these and prospectively for one or more?
In general, in the history of playgrounds, we've had usually a joint operation between PTOs and us. And in some cases, well, in most of the cases, they paid for virtually all the playground pieces. And then we, the school system, paid for the structure, the substructure to get the new ground ready for it, any sewage, not sewage, any drainage, etc. There was an exception of Pointe one year. They didn't have the money to pay for that kind of a playground, so we did the reverse there. We paid for the playground, the PTO raised money to help with the field development. So we've always had a joint operation going. If you recall, I think Mason's working on one now, raising funds for theirs. This is the first time we had to answer a complaint from regarding the ADA compliance. So it puts it in a new perspective. It's gonna be hard to go up to the PTO and say we need, I'm gonna grab numbers here. Let's say the whole project's $125,000. Say to them, you raise 100, we'll kick in 25. Because there's a timeline pressure here.
Yeah.
And we really, unfortunately, don't have many options. Oh, actually, we don't have any. Let's be honest about it. We've got to get this done, or we face the consequences of
An RC battle.
right, and that can get very expensive in terms of legal fees. So we want to proceed. And I'm going to jump in here. I hate to do that, but one of the things we don't like to do, I don't like to do it, I didn't like to do it, is go to one bidder. However, you had five companies there,
5 originally.
5 companies there, they went through the process. That's good. I mean, we've had situations where one showed up and that was it. So we've had 5 companies. We know the pricing is good based on other experience, so that part is good. I don't like going with one bidder, but we're faced with the reality of it.
How much time would that have pushed back if we would have found other bidders?
We'd probably look at a January award date. And with this timeline, they're looking to place an order by March for a summer install. Part of that process too is meeting with the stakeholders from each school, getting their buy-in, giving them options to select from, and then ultimately placing that order, which that process can take 2 or 3 months. So we felt if we were to award it in January, it would put us in a tighter timeline than it does right now.
So so Mason is covered by what they're doing, and Richard is covered by what they did in the.
Richard has a newer playground, so they're already ADA compliant. Mare is already ADA compliant. Kirby has been reviewed by this RecWise, and also Mason, they're in the planning phases right now, but Mason will be reviewed by RecWise as well.
And do you see any problems, Ben, with Kirby and RecWise?
No, Kirby was reviewed by RecWise.
Okay. And I apologize if I'm asking an out of place or stupid question here, but why is this something that we're doing through Plante Moran versus you just doing directly with these vendors?
Well,
in part, we wanted to have a consistent RFP process.
Okay.
From start to finish for all 4 of them, or all 5 of them.
Got it.
And we wanted to be consistent and go with potentially the same vendor to get better pricing. So we could have done a piecemeal, but there's also, again, the timeline. And we couldn't guarantee that we'd have vendors giving us pricing and options that would meet a deadline.
Okay, and then as far as the Plante Moran, I don't see it, is there a Plante Moran fee? I assume there's a fee we're paying for this, do you know what that is? Do you have a guesstimate? Is it a percentage, is it a?
So our fee is just a set fee every month. We don't get any additional fee based on the number of projects.
So yours is just a per monthly fee, what, do you know what that is?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay, I can ask Robert, it's not a big deal. Okay, thank you.
Chris, what would make it ADA compliant? And then are the structures able to be reworked or is it completely?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. Number one is the ground, the treatment of the ground. There's also, I'm trying to think where it was, where a wheelchair, Grosse Pointe Wood just put in a new playground over at,
Guess where?
no, at,
It's,
Licavoli's, right across from Licavoli's. Got the name of the street. Anyways, the wheelchair, for example, on the, merry-go-round, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
They can actually fit in there. They can actually get on the device. And a lot of the playground stuff, they can't. So that it's really adaptive to accommodate kids in wheelchairs or special needs.
Without going too deep in history, and I know these things always have a very long history, is there an inference here that there are differences among the playgrounds by virtue of it, like schools perhaps commonly through PTOs going forward on a kind of effectively, not by design, but an unequal basis? Is that
There has been going back many years.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why we wanted to do a uniform thing here. They're still gonna have input into the design, not the design, but the pieces and all that, but it will guarantee that everything meets and matches the ADA.
Just a thought. And there's so much history to this kind of issue, as nobody knows better than you, Chris. It feels like there's an opportunity somewhere in here to encode in the policy issues to take into consideration relevant to PTO and community donations, because there's always some gremlin that pops out of some corner on these things. And, it wouldn't affect any decision relative to this. It's just a history of somebody who's been in and around this stuff for 20 years, that it may be worth consideration of like some recommendation to the board policy committee to be like, you ought to look at this, because it's a good problem to have in that we've got generous community that's looking to donate money, but these kinds of things happen unintentionally.
And going way back, it used to be that the PTOs would get the sweat equity involved,
Yeah.
go out there and dig it. We don't do that anymore because of liability issues and other issues.
Never a building deferred.
Yeah.
It was one of the laborers that deferred.
Okay, good background, thank you.
Any other questions?
So we're gonna bring this forward to the board, and it's gonna be, unfortunately, it's one vendor, but I think it's.
When are you guys planning on bringing it?
I would like to bring it to the next board meeting.
Like next week?
Yeah.
14.
Okay.
With your blessing.
Well, no, it's fine with me. I just figured what else we have on the agenda. We've got MSB. We have a closed session on the 28th, Chris, or the 14th? Are we doing that?
That's 28th.
28th, okay.
So this will be easy because 7:00 vote, boom, we're done.
Okay. Works for me. Okay, great.
Relax.
Okay.
Can we get a accounting of the sinking fund dollars
Yes.
at that meeting? Like where this takes
Yep.
it, what's left, and when, if you know, when this year's 3 million or 2.9 million comes in?
Yep. And I think I'll have to go back and look, but I think they've been kind of holding back about $1 million on the sinking fund for quote-unquote emergencies or whatever. I think that's good.
Okay.
We'll get that way.
Next item we have is the parking lots.
Yep, so a little history on this before I'll kick Gary off. So back in 2022, we had a parking lot assessment done throughout the district. They drilled cores, they did all sorts of testing. That gave us the cadence to kind of a yearly schedule that we plan to redo parking lots. Everybody knows that some of the parking lots are really bad in the district, and we need support on that. So, for example, 2024, based on the parking lot assessment, we are scheduled to do, if approved, defer Mason North and South, different pieces to that. And then there's another segment in 25 and then 26. This RFP will cover just the civil engineering to all 3 years of that process.
Okay.
So, Gary, go ahead and you can.
Yeah, so one of the ideas behind hiring a civil engineering firm was that if we were to go direct, typically you hire an architect and they would subcontract a civil engineer for this.
And that's what we typically did before.
Yeah, so, I mean, going rates right now for an architect, maybe we're between 6.5%, 7, plus another 2% for a civil engineering firm. So our thought was, okay, let's just go directly to the civil engineer. Based on the assessment that Ben was referencing, there's about $8 million worth of work over the next, 3, 4, 5 years. We basically leveraged that buying power and said, okay, if we were to do 3 years worth of work, give us your rates for these projects going forward over the next 3 years. So we gave them a detailed plan. They gave us a proposal based off of that work. And the incumbent actually was about $130,000 higher than what the lowest bidder was proposing. So, I think the lowest bidder was at all in 5.44%, which is a pretty great fee for the amount of work that they're doing. Granted, it is over 3 years, and that work will only be paid off of the projects that proceed with. So if every year we evaluate and we say we're going to do, just for project's sake, north and south this year, and next year we'll do Mason and Monteith, but we decide to take off Monteith and put in Ferry, we're only going to pay them for the work that they're designing to do. So we're not going to pay them for all 3 years until that work is incurred.
So they get paid as on progress payment, so to speak.
Correct.
When they complete the work.
Yeah, but they know that they're bidding for a larger amount of work. It's just when we go forward with that. So overall, we had 4 different firms that are really respected bid on the work. For the most part, 3 of them were pretty close together. One firm was a lot higher. They were about double the cost of the other 3 firms. However, they had a really high allowance in there for construction phase meetings. I don't know why that number was so high, but they were high to begin with based on the phase. Correct. Yes. Yeah, because I'm buying a house here, I'm not sure. But so the other 3 firms, Spalding Decker was the incumbent. They did great work. They're the ones that actually did the assessment. PEA Group, we work with a bunch, the public and corporate sector. They were the low at $350,000, which is who we are recommending for the civil engineering firm.
So who do we used to use? Wade Trim did work for us?
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank there. I think they did on a couple. We used a couple different firms, but I'm drawing a blank there.
Walden used to do work
Yes.
for us a lot, I think a lot of work, in fact.
Why did the assessment?
Why do you think they were so far off?
There could be a combination. One, PEA they're not new to the market. They're trying to get more involved in K-12 work. I think that they could be just giving us a lower fee to get more references than the market. It's just our best estimate on this. We looked at all their proposal and made sure they checked all the boxes. We held a post-bid interview with them and confirmed that they had all the accurate scope in there. We're going to attend the right meetings, and they checked all the boxes.
You're comfortable as far as?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oftentimes in previous projects, like you said, some vendors want to get their name in there.
Yeah, it's like power.
And other ones didn't want the job because they were too busy, so they put a high bid in
Right.
just to keep their name out there.
Right.
That sometimes happens.
Okay.
So the summary of do you have a summary now of the proposed projects in year 1, 2, and 3?
Yes. Yeah. I can send you a digital copy of it that outlines the number of square feet by school.
Yeah, no, I just like to, so in June of 2022, Plante Moran kind of prepared our critical needs assessment. I'm guessing that's what this is based on.
We actually met again earlier this year with the district and looked at the assessment that Spalding Decker sent over. and selected projects based off of, the remaining life expectancy of those parking lots. And then put together a 3-year plan with actual dollar amounts that Spalding provided us.
Okay.
We can send,
So it might be different from what was in that.
Yeah, I'd just like to be able to compare it, like, just in the plan, you know, a lot of schools, like Brown Hill was shown as, at the time, as like a 7 to 10 year assessment for Brown Hill's parking lots. It may have changed, I mean, it's a reason for changing, we just like to compare it with what June of 2022 said.
yeah, so for fiscal year 2024, we have confirmed Mason, North, and South as the 4 buildings that are gonna have parking lot renovations.
You're not talking about total lots, right?
No,
No, correct.
North is just a back section, right?
Yes.
Morningside, so I can not get potholes. Thank you.
Yeah, and then fiscal year 2025, Kirby, Monteith, Parcells, and Richard. And then fiscal year 2026, we have Barnes, North, and South is the current plan. And we can send the board a copy of that as well.
And what really, like for North, for example, what really ages of the back parking lot, for example, and kind of the front, is construction equipment.
Right.
You got trucks going in and out of there. I mean, look what happened to Cook Road when they were doing all that stuff down there.
Plus delivery vehicles are in and out of
Yeah.
that lot all the time.
So,
Yeah, if you could send Chris, give Chris a copy of that, and you could get it to the committee members, that would be great, Chris. Thank you.
And, sorry, I forgot my train of thought. So again, the same question or request on the dollars, this is 570, right? 570 for the engineering work or planning work.
300.
yeah, 350.
I was looking at the other, I'm sorry, for the
350.
playground equipment, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, 350, and then, the 1 to 3 year. I'm assuming that at least at this point, we don't have if we're talking about sinking fund, we don't have all of those dollars in the sinking fund to cover what we're proposing at the moment, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, and then kind of like the look of where that money comes in and.
And that's jumping
Yeah.
way off the loop here. That's one of the decisions that the board's gonna have to make about the sinking fund.
Yeah.
And I think it's in November of 24. Yeah,
Yeah.
whether we go 1 mil, 2 mil, I think the limit is
3 mil.
3 mil.
Three.
So, you know, 3 mils could bring in $9 million or whatever the number is.
And maybe just, and this isn't specific to these 2 projects, one of them obviously is driven by regulatory and fairness concerns, but it feels like in starting to plan for that process and prioritize, it would be good to have a refresh of that critical needs analysis or some listing of everything we gotta do.
Right.
So that the board can prioritize
Mhm.
and it's not making, you know, ad hoc decisions
Yeah.
about a parking lot versus whatever else might be out there.
Right.
And that will allow us also to build consensus and support heading into that sinking fund decision.
Yep, I
Because I feel like it's a little bit of a vacuum without the more macro picture of what all the priorities are globally.
We can do that, yeah. Oh, we're gonna have to do
We have
that. To justify whether it's 1 mil or 2 mil, you gotta
Yeah.
show the board plus the public what's included. And those lists do change, but it gives you at least a somewhat moment in time. This is the top 20 projects or whatever.
Yeah.
So, Ben, are you looking to have the RFP for the consulting also this week?
I would like to.
Okay.
This one is not as critical as the playground stuff, but if we can get them both done, 7-0 would be great.
Yeah.
So the number that's calculated, I'll use the 350K roughly. Since that's a percentage of project, how was the project, you probably said it, but if you summarize for me again, how the project total was calculated?
So the project, so the $8 million from the assessment, ultimately we took the assessment, looked at the life expectancy of each parking lot. So how Spalding put it together is they would label, you know, for North, for example, there was probably 12 different parts of that entire lot, and they gave us different life expectancy for each piece of that property. We took the most critical needs and kind of worked backwards and did it more on a site-by-site basis, one from life expectancy and 2, what made sense. If, you know, piece 1 had a life expectancy of 2 years and piece 3 had a life expectancy of 3 years, we weren't gonna parcel them out, because we knew we'd get better economies of scale by just doing them together. So it was kind of a combination.
So if there was an 8 million assessment, and that's higher than what ultimately was used as a predicate of the 350, what was the predicate to the 350?
We can kind of
Like roughly, like,
find out right now.
That's a good question.
I don't need to know right this minute.
Yeah, we can get you that.
Yeah, because, I mean, this, you know, Joe put it well. I think one of the ways this committee could be more valuable would be to do some long-range analysis, I would put it, just analysis, like preparing analysis, not recommendations, not decisions, just like, because, you know, we're like a freight train headed to the sinking fund bond thing, and all of these pieces are gonna be so huge. And I'm really worried, as I'm sure you all are, about decisions that we recommend and ultimately make now that are done preceding like the big enchilada.
Picture,
Yeah, and so I think the sooner we get to that, the better. And you know, because the road that got us here is like, all right, how can we kind of work our way into this at the least possible cost, which all it does is aggregate costs. And you know, so like that needs analysis with the big hairy outrageous number that will never happen becomes like, there's no way, never, ever, ever. But meanwhile, there are roofs, there's parking lots, there's those fundamentals that there's no escaping those. Like you have got to do them, barring business building closures, which is also going to be on the rise. You know what I mean? So like, all I'm saying is it's a very complicated picture. It's everything everybody here knows. But with enough kind of long-range guidance, there might be something that this committee could do to really do some, you know, roll up our sleeves work and analysis, just to like be like, how can we start chipping away to get towards just assembling the materials needed to make decisions?
I think that the assessment that was done in 22, the format of it is great, like on a visual aspect, but obviously you have the data that would allow you to like filter by type of critical needs, right? You've got the three groupings, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, and 7 to 10. But we really can't filter it on this format, but you can, so we need the ability to see that, be able to filter by what's 1 to 3, what's critical, what's have to have, what's nice to have.
What format do you have that information in?
So we do typically a 10-year capital needs analysis.
I mean, as far as software goes.
It's all just Excel databases.
That's what I was gonna ask, is there
Yeah,
a
we have a team
master
that's-
fixed asset schedule or something like that, do you guys have?
Pardon? Sorry.
Is there a master fixed asset schedule?
As far as like current costs of different items, yes.
And then how long is depreciated out of?
Yep.
You have all that?
Yeah.
Okay. Start there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, typically we'll spend that 10-year, you know, look ahead, so,
And it's all in Excel,
Correct.
no other
Yeah.
software.
yes. Yeah.
What's
we
the
use-
expiration of Excel?
You can dump it in the program.
What's the sinking fund expiration date again?
It's 2024 November.
I think there's a year, man.
Well, yeah, we have to we go out to vote in 24. Technically, you have a couple times to, if
Yeah.
it fails, you can.
Yeah.
But
But
I
voting
forget the dates.
November,
Or could be in
this
the-
time next year.
Yeah, yeah.
We could do it
There's
in.
a lot of work.
Yeah,
between
a lot of
now and
work.
then.
And, you know, obviously one thing you have to look at also is what else is on the ballot during those
Yeah.
times, and I think we put something together that kind of outlines all of that.
Well, on that same ballot, you're gonna have, if it goes that route, you're gonna have,
The president.
your current mill, the homestead,
Fingertips.
non-homestead, everything. It's gonna be a lot of items.
Wow.
And the dollar amount,
I don't want to do.
just to add real quick, the dollar amount that this was budgeted on was $6.5 million roughly.
So what can we get you guys here? I look at you guys, especially with Heath joining the crew here as the Excel neurosurgeons. What can we get for you guys to help us get through this thing?
I think we should meet separately and just kind of come back to this group maybe with, you know, some ideas. Not recommendations, not decisions, just ideas.
Okay.
I mean, but I'm open to whatever.
Okay,
All right?
next on the hit list. So that So we're good for you. You can go home and enjoy your family. And
He lives close by, so that's good.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So next up is final audit.
Michael and Lisa, your show.
All right, our show, thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present here. So my name is Lisa Vargo. I'm a partner at Plante Moran in our K-12 practice area. And with me is Michael Walsh, senior manager in our K-12 practice area. We are here tonight to cover the results of our annual audit for the fiscal year ending 2023, along with covering some high-level financial results for as of June 30th, 2023, in the period then ending. I'm going to get us kicked off, cover some high-level facts, and then turn it over to Michael to cover some fiscal information. So to start it off, audits overall are required by the state of Michigan to comply with the state law. In addition to the financial statement audit, there is an audit required by the federal government because your federal grants do exceed $750,000. The federal programs rotate every year based on various factors that range from things such as risk, how much money is spent every year, and then what programs have been tested in the past years. So we refer to that as program cycling, and it is dictated by the federal government. Then we refer to these programs as majors, and we cycle them every few years. And then what happens is the federal government gives us a federal compliance supplement, and they tell us what they want us to test for the compliance. If during our testing, which is on a sample basis for compliance, we determine that something is not being performed properly or the funds are not being used as according to the federal government guidelines, we are required to report it as a finding. So this year, our required programs were IDEA and Education Stabilization Fund. So we had two major programs we had to test this year. Usually the major programs range between 2 and 3 major programs we test annually. And so then we also do the financial statement audit, which is where Michael's going to spend a lot of his time going over some of the big basic highlights here. But as auditors, what we do when we do the basic financial statement audit, we really primarily focus in 2 areas. The first thing we do is we do the assessment of controls. We're not testing your financial controls, so we're not coming through and putting an opinion on financial controls. But we're coming in, we want to make sure that your financial controls are set up structurally so that they're functioning in order to detect or correct any type of material misstatements that finance or accounting would identify throughout the course of the year, and not just at year end when you're getting ready for an audit. If the controls are not functioning as designed, again, there will be a finding. And the other focus as auditors that we have is to ensure that the accounting is accurate and in accordance with GASB. So those are really, I would say, our 2 primary objectives as we're kind of coming in. We do not and we cannot look at every single transaction, so we'll be here forever. We're already here probably 3 or 4 weeks, probably enough for the finance department. Our focus really primarily is on the higher risk, unusual transactions. We do a lot of brainstorming as we're kind of coming in, and we focus on materiality. We come in and we kind of think, what can really go wrong with these numbers, and we really focus in on that. We perform a lot of substantive testings, which looks at a lot of confirmations, a lot of third-party work, which means bringing it to invoices, bank statements, payroll records, things like that. We do a lot of sampling, we do a lot of analytic procedures, so those would be the type of sampling and testing that we do as we're bringing everything together. The financial statements are management's. The things that are Plante Moran's would be the opinion, which is what we're here to provide you the results on. So, the results are, I am happy to report that there is an unmodified opinion. An unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance we can provide as auditors that your financial statements are free of material misstatements. So that is an unmodified on both the basic and on the federal compliance. We did not find any findings either on the compliance or as we were doing an assessment of control. So congratulations, it's the highest level that we can provide. This is also what people would refer to as a clean opinion. So with this, I'm gonna send it over to Michael to go over some high-level general fund information.
So, as Lisa mentioned, most of the slides that we'll present on tonight are all general fund related. And I know this is pretty interactive, so by all means, so we're going through some slides. Feel free if you have questions or comments, feel free to interrupt. So, the first slide here is just showing general fund revenue for the district for the year ending June 30, 2023. Total revenue coming in at $110.8 million. The largest portion of that funding, as you're aware, comes from the state, so about 67% of total general fund revenue comes from the state. This would consist of the foundation allowance that the district receives, as well as some other categorical revenue. Some of that categorical revenue includes MIPSR's retirement funding, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So just kind of bookmark that for now. In terms of the foundation allowance, so that's based on enrollment at the district as well as the foundation allowance set by the state. So the foundation allowance set by the state was $10,837 per pupil for the year ended June 30, 2023.
Could you remind us what that is year over year on a percentage increase or decrease basis?
Yep, so the prior year was $10,350 per pupil.
Okay.
The next largest component is local source revenue. It's that kind of that teal color there, coming in 20%. That's primarily made up of property tax revenue at $21.2 million. There's also some gate receipts and some rentals on use of the building, things like that, makes up a small portion of that as well. Interdistrict revenue, kind of moving down here in that orange bucket at $1.2 million. That is revenue that comes directly from Wayne Resaw for a variety of programs. A lot of special education type programs are included in there. The enhancement millage, you see on there in kind of the black bucket there at $2.5 million. So that's the was voted on by Wayne County a couple years ago. So that's the district's portion of that pie.
What is that?
I think it's up this November as
I
well.
was gonna say,
They're gonna have I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
They're having a meeting at Wayne County to discuss that, putting it back on for renewal. So
and that's one of the ones that the voters here pay more in
yeah,
than
we're
we
not,
take out.
yeah, we give more than we get.
We're a donor district, not a receiver district on that.
Sorry.
Nope. So Lisa talked about the single audit that we performed, so that this federal dollars at 7% or $7.3 million of revenue, that's what's subject to that single audit. So included in that is the education stabilization fund. Those are those ESSER dollars that the district would have received. There's about $3.8 million of revenue in that for that program. And then the IDEA or special education cluster, there's an additional $2.6 million included in there. Both of which, again, we would have were major programs as part of our single audit.
So in this pie chart, where does the MIPSR, I mean, we know we're gonna talk about, but where's the MIPSRs in that?
That comes from the state, so that's included in that grade, 67%.
And where's the hold harmless?
Hold harmless is the local, is the $22.6 million of property tax revenue.
So that's all, is that all hold harmless, or is that a portion of it?
There's a portion of that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Other financing sources, that's that blue bucket of about $3 million. So this includes a couple things. There's indirect costs that the general fund gets reimbursed from the center program fund, then the school services fund. So there's just costs that the general fund is incurring, paying out during the year. And then as with those being special revenue funds, they're allowed to reimburse an approved indirect cost rate back into the general fund. So there's a portion of that, and then in addition, the district sold the 389 administration building. Proceeds were just under $1 million, so that's also included in those other financing sources. And I know that's been assigned fund balance, and Lisa will talk a little bit on that.
I had a question for you on that. When you get to that, Lisa, legal fees that were involved in that, as far as where they get booked, did we net those out of the proceeds, or as far as
Yeah, they're netted
Sucked out
in.
of the general fund?
Yeah, so they're netted in with the proceeds
Okay.
for the assignment.
Thank you.
Yep.
So as I mentioned some of the mixers funding, and so we just kind of wanted to break that out and what that means for the general fund. So, some background, the district, along with all districts in the state of Michigan, participate in the statewide retirement pension system for its employees. And effectively, the cost of that continues to rise from a retirement perspective. So the state's really focused a lot of resources and revenue to paying down. There's this significant unfunded liability, billions of dollars at a statewide level. The district has a small portion of that that's pretty significant. So the state's putting more and more dollars towards spending that down. And because from a legal perspective, since the state doesn't participate in that plan, they cannot fund it directly. They have to use the participating districts to basically do that funding. So the money comes into Grosse Pointe, you recognize revenue, and then Grosse Pointe turns around, sends those same dollars back to to fund the pension system effectively. So there's revenue and expenditure associated with that. So we kind of want to just break that out and what that means for the general fund. So, because it's obviously a very significant portion. So, that's a 16.5 million total, and there's kind of two mechanisms to that. One is a recurring allocation that the state provides the district. It came in at about $10.4 million this year. The district would have received that for a number of years now, again, revenue, expenditure. In addition to that, the state decided to put another $1 billion of additional resources to pay down that liability this year. And that's a one-time funding mechanism. So Grosse Pointe's allocation of that was about $6 million. So that's in total $16 million, again, that just comes in. You recognize it as an expenditure, you see it in a benefit related expenditure to fund retirement. And then you also
You don't
see
get to
it
touch
in-
it.
You always net to zero, Mike?
Yeah, typically, yes, yeah. So, yeah, you don't get to touch it, there's no impact on fund balance, but obviously, if you're looking at, the district from a year-over-year basis, your revenue, your expenditure pool is up by effectively $6 million.
And what's the rationale for recognizing revenue, not just having it as a liability that just gets?
So, there is a, two kind of different accounting, I guess there's a modified, at a fund level, the liability doesn't get recognized because based on the accounting rules that the GASB sets for the general fund, it's long-term in nature. Like I think this probably won't be paid down for another, I can't remember the exact, probably 20 years down the road or something.
Okay.
So the state will continue to kind of chip away, the district will keep chipping away. On a government-wide basis, which is full accrual basis, similar to what a lot of commercial entities see, and when we present on that in financial statements, you will see a pretty significant liability on the district's books for that.
Gotcha, thanks.
Just because it's on the page and you can push me off.
Yeah.
But on the net change in fund balance, am I correct in my assumption that if we hadn't booked the sale of the administration building, that would be negative $1 million less $112,000?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
That's a good question, Joe, because some districts, like for instance Bloomfield Hills, when they were selling their properties, they took the sale proceeds, they did not throw that into the pot.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to know
Yeah.
and make sure everyone understands it. It's not, net operating. It's a one-time thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's an asset that's.
Yep.
Yeah, with the assignment too, that I believe the board approved for those funds, they're kind of earmarking those for a specific purpose. So when you look at the fund balance in terms of the components of fund balance, you'll see that as like a separate category
Yeah,
for that purpose.
Yes, thank you.
Those were earmarked for board trips.
Where's your son, Cancun?
He's in Peru.
So this slide, we just wanted to highlight some of the non-recurring COVID-related relief federal funding that the district and all districts in the state of Michigan would have received over the years. And this is as a point in time as of June 30, 2023. So this, this graph shows funding through that date. So effectively, if you think from the pandemic, from the start of the pandemic to today, or through June 30, 2023. This is just not the snapshot. How much has been awarded to the district at $15.5 million, and how much has been spent as of June 30, 2023 at $11 million. So if you kind of move down to the bottom, you see we have, the district has ESSER 3 awards that are unspent. The district has until September 30th, 2024 to spend those dollars. So that would be included in the 23-24 budget. So certainly not unspent dollars. Those will we'll probably present the same slide next year and see that those have been spent.
Chris, have those all been allocated?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So it's 4.5, it's not gonna be there next year. It's in this year's budget.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, the main highlight too with this, obviously, non-recurring. So once those dollars are spent, districts aren't getting them, Grosse Pointe's not getting another
Every district in the state has the same.
Yeah, so there's the concept of the funding cliff that all districts are gonna face, once these.
Big reality check coming up. For a lot of districts.
So the next couple slides will focus on general fund expenditures. This first slide shows it by function. So the state of Michigan has a defined account chart that all districts have to follow. And based on that account chart, this is the various buckets or various departments that each district would have. So the largest portion here at 59% of that total of $110.7 million is instruction related expenditures. The second largest being pupil instruction related expenditures at 13%. So instruction, one way to look at that is that's typically teachers, teacher aides directly in the classroom. Pupil instruction services are more of those indirect instruction related. So that would be librarians, counselors, literacy coaches, things of that nature. So when you really pull those two together, you're looking at about 72% of total general fund expenditures are either directly or indirectly in the classroom to the students. In terms of the other components, or the other departments that you see on here, a lot of these percentages, again, we talked about how it's a bigger expenditure pie with some of those retirement costs, but the actual percentages by department are pretty consistent year over year for those remaining functions.
And where is like ongoing facility maintenance and upkeep housed?
It's either in operations.
Okay, so 11%.
Yeah.
I think a big factor, and I sent this memo earlier today, that people need to remember, is that with this larger amount that is unnaturally high, when you represent fund equity as a percentage of the revenue expense, it's gonna look lower. So everybody here needs to understand that, because there will be questions about that.
Right.
And it's not a true reduction.
Yeah, and to that point, I think Lisa will probably touch on this, but
Yeah.
maybe jumping ahead a little bit. So I think the statewide average last year for June 30, 2022 for fund balance as a percentage of expenditures was about 20.3%.
In the 20% range.
And we kind of see that climbing a little bit with a lot of these ESSER dollars and things like that. It'll be interesting to see once we get the information for June 30, 2023. Even if some districts are adding to fund balance and continue to add to fund balance, with that expenditure holding high, to your point, it could be, that percentage might be lower.
Okay, yeah, the state's at 20, we're at 10, and it just, somebody hasn't moved.
Well, the other thing that I'm glad you brought that up, because Laura and I used to go back and forth on this all the time. What do you recommend? What should a school district like ours, with our tax collection process that we have, what should we have for fund equity?
You want to take that one?
I think it comes back down to looking at, like, when you were talking about, like, the needs assessments, it takes, I think you need to have into looking at 5-year plans, 10-year plans, and looking into assessments like that. It's hard to make that type of assessment just off the cuff without really looking at pupil enrollment. Like, there's a lot of other things that need to be taken into account.
What are you doing then?
I mean, but I would say it's a hard answer, like age of districts, enrollment, needs assessment of schools, all those factors need to come into play in order for, we keep throwing out these percents, like 20%, 15%, 9%. I mean, 9% might be perfectly fine for a consistently stable district that doesn't have a lot of need assessments and everything is pretty stable. That might be perfectly fine. So you have to kind of like look down the path in order to really get the right policy that you need for your fund balance.
I know a lot of school systems have a specific policy.
Yes, they do.
Like Bloomfield Hills
Yes.
has, I think, what's their minimum 15%. Novi has a minimum 10%.
Yeah, we've never had a policy that,
We've never had a policy
Yeah,
that I remember.
as far as I know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've seen them all across, I don't think I've seen any lower than 10%, as far as like goals of what the policy should be. But I think that those are the factors that the board needs to come together to come to a decision on what the policy should be.
So what is there that you can provide us so that we can get there?
I think that we could probably provide you some comparables and some other type of information to help kind of pull it together.
What do districts with a larger fund equities generally have the gap fund during the course of the year?
No, so that's one of the benefits, right, is if you have enough fund balance to get you through that month of September where you're not having to borrow, because the first state payment comes in October, there's certainly savings associated with that. I think
Interesting to know what we've spent gap fund in the last number of years and what would have got us out of gap fund.
There's a couple $100,000 last year.
Yeah,
That's a
I
100
actually,
a quarter or something like
I
that.
remember like $300,000-400,000 in interest expense.
Yeah,
I think,
She has it right there. She didn't pull it right out for us. I can see.
for 23, it was 144,000. You'll kind of see this when we show the 5-year fund balance comparison. I think in 22 and 21, there's next to nothing, very small, with fund balance being a little bit higher. 96,000 in 2020, and then 205,000 in 2019.
Does it say what we borrowed each year?
That I don't know. Yeah, that I don't know. It's that what's drawn on the line is always paid off by.
Right.
Right.
Right,
Just,
yeah.
revolving line.
Thank you.
So the next slide here just shows that same general fund expenditure pool, looking at it by object, effectively looking at where are these dollars being spent, or where are these resources being allocated. As you would expect for a school district, being run by employees and providing the service, a significant portion, about 85% of total expenditures are either salary and wage related or benefits related for those employees. And the next slide will talk a little bit more about that benefit pool of about 43.4%, or $1 million.
Do you know why the audit doesn't give the tabular detail of this view?
Like an actual report or the,
I mean, other audits do, I don't know why we don't.
the tab, like the,
Like, so you just cutting the data by object as opposed to the traditional whatever.
like what's shown in
construction.
the financial statements. The financial statements, I think, are just, that's how, I think like a GASB governmental.
Some of the schools do what they call a comprehensive annual financial.
Oh, that, yes.
And there'll be
That's
all
what
sorts
you're
of
referring
charts and
Oh,
stuff.
oh,
And
oh, yeah.
we used to do that a long time ago. I don't think we've done it recently, but just, it's a more comprehensive,
Yes.
The data's obviously there.
Yeah. and-
Yes.
Right, and then what some of the districts then do is present them to,
as well.
ASBO
yeah.
for a certificate of excellence or whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
One, I raise it not because why don't we do it. One of the reasons why this view is helpful is that when you're in budget contraction mode, it's far easier to deal with, or at least there's whatever. Your dealing supplies and materials are easier to target than people. And so when you cut the data this way, at least it gives you a sense of where these costs are. And I think it's to the benefit of the district.
And some of those other reports also list, for example, your highest taxpayers in the district.
Yeah.
Tax history for 10 years.
I get all that, but this one is actually valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, a couple clients that we had, the way I was, the act, it's an act for now is the acronym for it, but the way I always describe those to the public is, you know, the financial statement for Grosse Pointe is 50 pages. If you do that presentation, do all the additional statistical section that goes into it, which is 10 years, taxpayer information, a lot of things that come from the local cities, you're looking at like another 50 pages.
How much more do you charge for that?
It's, so first year, it's usually at least about 30% more. 'Cause it's approximately, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a lot of information.
first year's a bite, but then once a year, you just add dates.
Subsequent year, I have to like look at it, but usually subsequent year, it will come down a little bit more because the information's there and you're just adding on the additional
Can
years
you
on
give
there.
us that? Get a
Yeah, you know,
proposal for
and
that?
actually, cause I have been pulling that information together for Amanda when she was here.
Okay.
We had been kinda like talking about it a little bit at the time, but yeah, I've got some of that information I can pull.
Is
up
it
for you.
something that we need, as a board, needs to act on, or is that something, Chris, you do as a service
No,
contract?
it's something you agree with auditors, or in the past, I don't think we have the staff, you just did it internally.
Well, I was just gonna suggest, it is something that you could do internally for the your management team to
Yeah.
pull together internally. I would
It's
say, there's not a lot of upside, I mean, from a financial impact from an audit, you don't get a lot of upside for an AFRS.
Well,
This
what-
view alone is.
Well, yeah, absolutely, which is why your management team could.
For example, when they're
could do
doing
it.
the bond ratings, that's helpful information.
Yes.
If you just present the whole report, otherwise you have to go through their questionnaire. and
Well,
all
plus,
individual.
if it comes with your rubber stamp on it, I think it has a little more validity when we're doing.
But they always put a disclaimer on there anyway.
Yeah,
We can erase that.
Yeah, technically it's unaudited, but we do at least like, you know, and like presentations like this, if that graph was included.
I think the statement is this next section, we have nothing to do with.
It's kinda almost what we said.
Yeah.
We say we review it in connection with the audit, so.
If you could give Chris a proposal.
Yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
great.
I can pull out what I pulled together for Amanda with it. It is a lot of work, as you can imagine, like pulling, because, it is not specific for school districts, and so there's a lot of like information that you might look at to be like, this is not really like pertinent to the school, but you still need to pull it together to get the certificate for the AFRS. But yes, I can pull that together,
Thank you.
because I did pull that together for Amanda.
Appreciate it.
One last question. The percentage of the capital outlays and other, is that normal, or is it unnaturally low because we have a sinking fund because we just went through a bond project?
Yeah, so a lot of your capital expenditures are run through your bond fund, your sinking fund, to the extent, you know, they're approved and voted on and allowable, within those funds. So this is kind of the, you know, either projects that maybe didn't fit into that proposal language, or maybe, you know, the district maybe made the decision that they were gonna pay out of the general fund for.
Or some projects, by definition, can't come out of this.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Chris, can you budget for us to get these in color?
No, black and
We
white.
already got
Yeah,
rid of that last
All the
one.
way.
I know.
One last
Right
kick,
to the computer.
one last kick at the
They're
dead
useless
horse.
in black and
One
white.
last kick at the dead horse on this view. All the time, how many times do we talk about what were our benefits costs? So like, and we're a self-funded program, so this has got a lot of variance. So how well does our board right now know what has happened from healthcare year to year? We don't. So I mean, this is why this view is so.
Well, I don't know now, but you did at one time.
We did it one time,
Yeah, one
we're
time.
blind now.
Yeah, we had a chart that said health, dental, vision, all that. stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you used to do a great job. on
We
that.
used to have the monthly healthcare report, I mean.
So that's not done now?
No.
Maybe, well, I'll jump over the benefits first, but there is at least a slide that, after this, where we have a 3-year comparison by object code that at least gives you a little bit of a year-over-year comparability. But in terms of just that employee benefit detail, so this is just a quick graph that breaks out that $43 million of benefits. You know, like we talked about, that 68% is retirement costs. So that's $16.5 million that you got from the states included in there. But on top of that, that only covers a portion of that retirement cost for the district. Effectively, for every dollar of salary and wage that the district pays, you're also funding another 28 cents that comes out of the district's pocket on average towards retirement costs. That's not reimbursed by the state. So that's also included in that $29.5 million number there. And then, yeah, as mentioned, healthcare costs with being a self-funded plan, that came in at about $10.3 million, and then Social Security makes the remaining portion.
How does that healthcare compare to last year?
Way higher.
Yep, so,
That number looks big, I mean.
yeah, so looking year over year, so if we look at that employee benefits from 21 to 22 and then into 23, so we talked about the $6 million of the one-time funding, so that's driving the increase to the $43 million. From a healthcare cost perspective, I don't have the exact number, but there was, in 2022, at the end of the year, and a lot of this was just kind of healthcare trends from coming out of the pandemic, and based on, being self-funded, paying those premiums and the claims kind of trailing behind. At the end of 2022, the district was at had overpaid into that plan effectively. So that actually lowered the expenditure cost because it's kind of treated as a prepaid. Whereas in 23, I think your claims activity kind of, I'll say kind of leveled down to maybe normal levels. And so that's where you see the kind of, I guess, increase back to the norm from that perspective.
Is there a way, does your system allow you to take our currently adopted budget and generate this for 24?
That's why.
Basically.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Could I ask that we have that?
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
How does that increase compared to
January.
other school districts year over year?
I'm
10 million variance.
So I mean, every district's receiving that one-time funding mixer, so that's gonna,
Is that the UAAO?
it's a portion of it, yeah.
A portion of
Yeah.
it, yeah. And then everybody had that one-time portion.
Yeah,
of
I'm
that
talking about,
one-time.
the benefits.
Yep.
Yeah, so every district's gonna have that one-time funding, so there's a couple million, I think that basically every district's gonna have an increase in benefits just for that.
We can also get a breakdown between 23 and 22, healthcare, dental vision, life, etc.
So here, it just says, to know what planet we're on, the 43.3 is 6 million higher than it normally would be. So basically, your point of reference is from 33.7
To 37.
to 37.
Yeah.
So that was a hammer this year.
Yeah, what else say?
And if I heard you correctly, a little bit of 22 was an offset that caught up later.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not exactly that. There were some, I'm assuming, low months in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's mainly more timing related than time. Yeah.
So it's not exactly that, but it is increasing, that's for sure.
And what happens is toward the end of the year sometimes, if you have, I don't know how many people, when you get a lot of people leaving retirement, they do a run on healthcare. To get all their checkups, their glasses, dental all done before they leave.
But huge to know though, because then 22 means the
Right.
bottom line result would have been abnormally better than the actuals. This stuff is so valuable. This is an area we gotta get better in, going forward.
Yeah, there were a lot of unusual healthcare trends in 21 and 22 with COVID, particularly being self-insured, which started to kind of smooth out.
And I don't know in this, how many cases were above our stop loss.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we'd have to take a look at it.
How many of your other systems self-insure?
I've got a handful that are. Everybody's like a little different mixture of self-insuredness, whether it's workers' comp, health insurance, and if it's health insurance, like what their different stop loss is.
We're self-funded for workers' comp, dental vision, and health. And we used to, I don't think we have, what's that?
The stop loss on each of those?
Well, on dental vision, no, because it's not worth it. You can't get it, we got rid of that a long time ago. But on workers' comp, clearly there is, and also on the health. Now, I had looked, at one time, and Brendan, you know, we had a couple different plans. We had a self-funded Blue Cross, and then we had
That's
HMO.
right, I remember that.
I don't think they have that anymore. That makes a difference on that.
And, yeah, I think just the one other, trend I think that probably jumps off the page for everybody is, if you look at supplies and materials in 2021, obviously that was, coming out of the pandemic, trying to get kids back in the classroom, and
Oh, yeah.
so that definitely drove that amount up a lot higher, where I think in 22, 23, that's probably more normalized.
All right, yep, so this slide, just real briefly, as Michael went through a high-level results of the revenue and the expenditures, we wanted to take a moment to compare the final results of the final budget that was approved by the board in June of 2023 to the actual numbers from the audit. Again, more comparisons, because we always like benchmarks. But a good benchmark of sound budgeting would be a range between 1 to 3% of variances of spending. So as you can see, the district has the under budget variance of about 1% of the expenditures. So when we look at where the final budget ended up and we compare it to the final general fund actual, the budget variances fall into that the good benchmarking variance.
Counterpoint, this is adopted before when the year's basically done.
Yes,
I mean,
It
is
is.
the second amendment, is that?
Yeah, it is a final amendment, except it's not when, true, and that's absolutely true, except that, everything's not finalized with all the numbers yet either. Like, everything's not closed or finalized, it's like.
Where does this sit with the beginning budget we had?
We don't look at the beginning budget. We focus
That'll
on
be a
the
big
budget.
difference. I mean,
I sent that out earlier.
yeah, there's always a,
How much, what was the difference?
and I think,
Huge.
Amanda only did 2 budget
Two
changes
budget.
or 3.
Yeah, I know like the additional one-time deposit, I think that wasn't known until after, so that's $6 million right
Right.
there in state revenue expenditures. I don't think any district really knew about.
Maybe just 2 questions. Where did we save on expenditures relative to the second amendment? Where did we pick up that $1 million?
There's a chart in the, I don't know off the top of my head like specifically, but there's a chart in the financial statements, it's kind of towards the back of it, that'll show you by.
I think it was instruction.
Instruction.
I'm just curious what in instructions that we don't.
That would be more
You'd have to
management.
pull it out, I don't know.
And then the second question would be, when are we gonna do the first amendment?
Probably in December, and then that amendment will be, adjustment for the enrollment, the official fall count. The adjustment for the per pupil amount from the state, the adjustment of the actual fund equity, and, I got a list,
I think per pupil, the budget included the,
5%.
well, included what, I think, she picked the exact number that, whatever the governor's budget was, right? Isn't that what it was approved? Yeah, so I don't think there'll be any change per
Well,
pupil, but the number of pupils.
number of pupils will change.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then there might be some changes in, some categoricals.
Sorry, follow on. I noticed in the materials that there was this piece of the school, what's it called, the school aid bill for districts within declining enrollment. Does that kick into this budget year? Where you can look like back over the last 2 years to do a blended enrollment and get gross up?
I think it was effective this year or next year.
I'd have to look and get back to you on that, I don't know.
I think it's included in the.
Yeah.
Letter, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there should be.
There's a bunch of stuff that's relevant to us.
Yeah.
that's right.
A lot.
Yeah.
Pre-K, like a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a paragraph, I can't remember the exact timeline, there's in the, letter to the Board of Education, and then,
Yeah, I
is
saw
that where you saw it?
Yeah.
I think it says what the exact
Do you have a copy of that?
Yeah.
It's in, yeah, you sent it out.
Yeah, I sent it,
Oh,
I sent it to all you guys.
Yeah,
don't know if I thought it had to be now.
You don't need to tell me now, it's just like,
Yeah,
it's something we should be
it's-
thinking
it
about.
was a
Yeah,
while
oh, yeah,
since-
absolutely, It was absolutely. a one-time, kind of a one-time enhancement.
I don't remember I just know that I thought we would be benefited by it,
Yeah, I
given our
think,
enrollment trends.
I think it was in the state budget for more than 1 year, I could be wrong on that.
It sounded like it's ongoing, the way I read it, but.
Did we have a preliminary, was there any report on enrollment?
Yeah, we're in good shape, we're above what we projected. But we're waiting for, where it gets a little complicated, and I didn't realize it, it has, for example, I'm gonna pick one example. We have a child who's homeschooled and takes orchestra, okay? Sometimes we were picking that person up as a whole person as opposed to 1/7. That's what we gotta make sure that it's all nice, and I think we're pretty close.
Close to projection? or
Yeah,
better? Close to-
so, we're actually over projected.
Don't you have like 2 or 3 weeks to find people after the?
Yeah, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And I think I got it.
When do you, don't we normally get a blessing from Wayne Reese about now?
Not from Wayne Reese, but from the state. And I got a notice.
I thought our final number had to be blessed through Wayne Reese for plus or minus for special ed for the host program.
Oh, that thing comes from Wayne Reese, but I'm talking about the state. Hold on a minute. Keep talking amongst yourselves.
I agree with Joe, the 1% is a very interesting where did it become uploaded to?
Yeah, and if
For
it's
planning
instructional,
purposes, right?
why, like, does benefits get wrapped up in there, is that probably not where you wanna be under, but maybe it's because of benefits, I just be curious why. For what?
November 15th is the last day of the adjustments, so it's soon. And then they typically, through the county, the state, they come and do an audit. For example, at, I'm gonna make schools up, South and Parcells. And they'll see if it's all accurate. Now, if it's within some variance, and I forget what it is.
5%.
5%, then they'll add, if you goofed up, they'll add more schools to test, and then it takes forever. And we've never been in that situation, so.
All right, the general fund, fund balance, okay, so this analysis brings in the revenue fund that we've discussed that has been earned and the expenditures incurred, we've discussed through the previous slides. The excess of revenue over expenditures was about $112,000, which increased the fund balance this year. The total general fund balance at the end of the year was approximately $9.8 million. As we discussed earlier today, one of the measurables of the fund balance is to look at the fund balance as a percent of the expenditures. So at June 30th, 2023, the fund balance is about 8.8% of the 2023 expenditures. But as we also discussed, one item to note, as Michael explained earlier, there was that one-time 147C2 deposit of about $6 million. So if you do exclude that expenditures from that amount, the percent of expenditures to fund balance is like 9.4%, which is pretty much consistent with what it was last year. So it's staying consistent with prior year.
But that's including 389 sale.
That is including the sale of the admin building, yes it is.
You're comparing apples to oranges. Did you forget 389, where are we at?
Yeah, I mean, right, so.
Yeah, you're down a million,
Yep.
that's really the MS,
Well, I think the bigger number to understand is if you compare it to the June 2022 budget forecast, it was 12.1 million, so we're $2.4 million under where we thought we would be.
Comparing it to the what?
The approved June
Oh,
2022.
okay, got it, yep.
Which was actually audited and was less, I think it was changed to 10% in November, after your audit, November of 2022. So the GAA number one in 2022 changed that projection to 10%
Oh.
from 12%, so we're down 2.4 from June 2022 projection, and down $1 million something from December 2022 projection.
So the next slide, we just kind of threw up a 5-year comparison of the trend of fund balance over the last few years. So this slide gives the 5-year trends, but also shows how some of the fund balances is categorized. So 2.0 in 2023, you can see that it's about $972,000 for the sale of the admin building is assigned. So of your $9.8 million of the general fund balance, it is assigned. So that it is segregated assigned, so to point that out. What do I want to point out here? You can kind of see in 2022, that's, you can kind of see the effects of like COVID and the decrease and then the consistency between 2022 to 2023. But we wanted to provide an oversight of the prior 5 years.
What was the assigned in 2021? What was the assigned?
Oh, 2021 was assigned for the next year's budget. So next year's assigned budget, the board had assigned to use the next year's fiscal budget in 2021 of fund balance. So for 2023, there is no usage for 2024's budget.
It's like a shell
Right
game.
now.
It's, that's a timing thing, so
Yeah.
you're adopting the first budget for the following year in June, so Gatsby rules basically say the board's assigned that, since you're using some of that fund balance, you've assigned it.
Yeah, if you budgeted a negative budget, you use the fund balance.
So just to, sorry, Ahmed, just to overlay some context here, is it fair to say that the increases in per pupil funding we saw the last 2 years were historically above average?
Yes, they were.
Yes.
Like, 2 standard deviations outside of historical
Yes.
average.
Yep.
Yes.
And we're in a pretty supportive political environment in the state of Michigan for public schools.
Yes.
Yeah, the one thing to keep in mind there though with that
Yeah.
is if you go back a number of years, like the foundation allowance has certainly gone up from what it was, but it just recently caught back up to a
10
very
years ago.
significant
Yeah.
decrease like 10 years ago, and that's not inflation adjusted. So
No,
it's just-
understood. The reason I say it is just, there's an obvious trend line. When we've had some, outside of COVID, some reasonably positive regulatory factors, and we were talking about the November 24 election, that there could be political change. You ask, anyone walking down the street, no one knows, but there could be a recession.
It'd be a big sucking sound coming out.
And so I just wanna make sure that we recognize that, we kind of held constant here, but in a pretty favorable environment.
Yeah, and I just want to point out I know we talked a lot about the COVID funds and they've been very useful and they've been great, but they really didn't have a lot of impact on your fund balance for the general fund.
No.
Because it's money in and it's money out.
Yeah, I'm more so
Okay.
talking about the per pupil.
Okay,
5%
yeah, I just wanted to make
increases.
sure
Like
okay.
if your revenue is
Yep,
growing
that's fair.
2 standard deviations outside of the historical
Yep.
trend, and you're holding constant, you need at least contingency planning for that, not just going up and to the right forever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an
that's fair.
observation.
And I'd say that would be true if you spent those dollars on only COVID-related spending, right? If you padded your general fund expenditures using COVID dollars, then that trend becomes even worse.
Yeah, and that we'll see how, that's where, if some districts are doing that, that's where they.
You guys rep Triple Valley, you do theirs.
I think, do we still do that? I think we still do.
Yes.
We did at one point, I think we still do.
Well, Amanda talked about that quite a bit too. She said that she was very careful not to do anything that would make it look like we had more money than we did, and we really did. I mean, she told me that at some point, some of our peer districts were using it for, they somehow termed it in such a way that it was for instruction purposes.
It's legacy issues.
Legacy issues.
So that's
And-
yes, and so, again, like, it didn't really grow the fund balance, but it committed the district for future costs.
Yeah.
And so that was going to really drain districts in the coming years when those funds weren't coming in any longer.
Yeah, and she said that's one of the reasons why one of our, some of our peer districts have higher fund equity balances, because they used it in ways that they probably shouldn't have done it. And she said she was always very careful not to make sure there was any padding where it shouldn't have been padded.
Mhm.
But I put it in the note I sent out today. My takeaways from a lot of this over the last couple of years is just we've been overly optimistic on a revenue forecast, and it's burnt us, and we just can't. You can't do that, because if you don't get the cost out by May of the preceding year, at least have a plan for it. You're done.
You're screwed.
Yeah, we could do some sort of like base case, good case, bad case.
Yeah.
Sensitivity analysis, just for our own internal planning.
It's a great idea.
If you look at what I've sent, I mean, our original budget's optimism relative to what actually happened over the last 2 years is like 6-7 million to the bad. I mean,
So let's just say, okay, what happens if it goes as we think?
Yeah.
But what if not? And what if some ships land?
Yeah, you can have good, better, bad, worse.
But again, I think the GA number one is the job security to take a look at
Yeah.
that, because you're gonna have some
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
information available with headcount, I think that the foundation allowance was already baked in, but you'll have the extra $112,000 we didn't know we had in June, right? So.
Okay, next slide.
That's it?
That's it.
The next slide's a thank you.
Okay,
10 minutes early.
you guys are not done yet, where are you going? Hey, relax, Fenton. Does anybody, are there questions on the documents themselves that you guys want to walk through?
My only comment would be, there's, in that new bill, and I have no idea where it is, it's either enact it or sign it. But there's a lot of stuff that is relevant to us in there, that we should just make sure we understand and are planning around.
I know for the, related to the categorical stuff, I know Keith Howell pays real close attention to that.
Yes,
along
with
with-
declining enrollment, free lunch,
He's always
pre-K funding.
all that.
Well, I think it would be a good idea if everybody on this committee would come forward with what you guys think we need to have as far as budget documents. And because I'd like to get that, I'd like to at least get a framework in place. I want to be doing this in March and April,
Right.
And I'd like to get a framework in place now, so that everybody on the committee's in agreement that, hey, we've got the ammunition, so at least when we're recommending something to the board, we're doing it with our eyes wide open instead of half closed. Okay?
One question on the, I thought somewhere I read in there about the school lunch fund, right? We are much higher than.
Oh, do you?
We've got some money to spend.
Yeah.
Where
You get
do
3 months or
districts,
something.
where do districts,
So-
what are typical things that you can do with those dollars that maybe we haven't thought about?
Yeah, and to maybe a little bit more context on that too. So I would say probably, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but that comments in just about every school.
I was gonna
So
say
there's-
all but one of my districts, because of the federal funds
Yeah,
mostly right now, but it will go away because people will use it. So equipment in the cafeteria, I think is a big usage of those dollar amounts.
We did that last year.
Yeah, I have a few districts where I feel like they're gonna have to build a new wing on every school building of like just a cafeteria.
Is it, you can, so anything food service related, you can spend it on?
Yeah,
Basically.
you have to submit something to the state kind of monitors that, but, yeah, it's.
Can you buy a truck to take your
Somebody-
meals from one building to another?
Another district from the.
I thought we did at one
spent.
point.
There's
But I could
60
be
grand
wrong.
out there, I don't think we purchased the truck yet, but can you, that would be an interesting question, can you use the
You know,
truck?
yeah, we can look into that. I've actually heard of another district that mentioning that same,
Our food service company delivers meals uses our truck to deliver meals to other buildings, so.
Yeah.
And we paid like $60,000 or $70,000 for a van with a lift van.
Okay. It might, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but it could.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Before we go on, we've got new business. The new business I'd like to go over, so if we could just do a round robin real quick. While we've got Plante Moran here, of things that you guys, this whole team thinks we need to have. And so that they can make a note of it, if it's something that's a cost-related thing, they can get Chris an estimate for what it will cost to provide us. But I'd like to just get a quick scan through here of, based on what you've seen so far, what else you think we need to be looking at? And I don't know, Heath, again, you've been thrown in the fiery pan here pretty quick, but is there anything you see from, based on your budgeting experience, that we should be asking for or looking to get?
Yeah, it's early. I mean, I think about the detail. I mean, it's in your system. I mean, we have it in the school district system, but I don't know, you know, the appetite to digest it and who's looking at it. I think that would be more my question, not knowing the details yet on the management side. You know, what's the structure? But overall, I don't have a lot to offer right now today, but I think there's a little bit more detail that may be valuable to this committee to help inform the board. You know, what level that is, I don't have a good sense right now.
Thank you. Terry?
Well, I mean, I think I talked to the other gentleman from Plante Moran about wanting that 10-year forecast of expenditures and having it in a format. A PDF is great to look at, but it's not real great to kind of work through.
Just getting it in Excel format.
Excel, or it'd be great if someone could create a dashboard that we could just go to and look at. I don't know how possible it is, but you know, that would be ideal.
Yeah. We can, I'll talk to Real Point. I feel like I don't want to overpromise anything, but I feel like I've seen something like along those lines, so we can certainly.
Yeah, be a dashboard or
I
something.
think they use iBuild or something.
Yeah, iBuilder, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but other than, I think the annual audit financials, it's some of the district stuff that we have to talk about as a district, like you were talking about, the reporting that comes out of our systems to kind of talk about where we're at. As long as we're doing things the way we're supposed to do legally, and putting the money in the right categories, it's really getting that categorical data out of our own system.
Great. Brendan?
I share a lot of detail in the memo I sent. I know I sent it later today, so you may not have had a chance to look at it. I mentioned a couple things today. We report by function all the time. We need some reporting by object, and we can cross-reference those two things to get a much better view of where the money's moving, how it's moving, and then what can be affected by budget decisions. So I think that's a really big one. The other really big one I mentioned in the note is that we used to do a much better job of reporting on staff FTE, by function, by building, et cetera, because again, in budget cutting mode, what have we ended up doing? We end up cutting headcount. And so by having that baseline view of where the headcount is, at least everybody's got a common understanding of what is out there. And that helps the administration can avoid a lot of ad hoc requests or busy work that they don't have time for, so that that should just exist. That should be a monthly report, and as it used to be. The same with the monthly healthcare report. We spent a lot of time in very difficult budget times developing that for that very reason, because of the variability of self-funded programs. So I think we had a lot of good practices in place that were just stopped. That as times got tight, we're realizing the value of them. So views by object, the staff utilization and distribution, healthcare costs and variable healthcare costs. I mean, we had all of these things. They just need to be reanimated.
Okay. Ryan?
I think from a long-range capital needs assessment, we talked about that fixed asset depreciation schedule going out, you know, how many years in Excel format. It's more of a management thing, but if you guys have it too, which I'm sure you do, you know, taking a look at that, and so we can plan more, you know, 5, 10, 15 years out.
I won't repeat anything that's been said, I agree. I would be interested in where that $1 million of savings relative to budget, you know, in instructional services, like, what that is. It's a pretty big number in a really important area. And I'd like to, you know, encourage us to do all the things that everyone else said, including more real-time tracking and more disparate sensitivity analysis around planning for different contingencies, because there's innumerable.
Colleen?
Well, I think the first thing we should do is celebrate our administration for giving us a clean audit. Having the highest level of assurance, and I think that's an attribution to Amanda and John and Chris Fenton and everyone that's worked on making sure that we have the highest audit. So thank you for showing us that today, and I appreciate our administration for doing that.
And I would add Brandy Pavlik.
Yeah, Brandy, yeah, Pavlik, yes, for
She's been,
sure.
especially since Amanda as well,
Yes.
she's been great, so thank you for saying that.
Absolutely, I think that's fantastic for our financial future, and it will help us be in a very strong financial position. I'm more interested in the long-term goals, and I think we should really start talking about what we need to do to lay the groundwork for a bond. I mean, I know we've sort of talked about it, but every time we come to this committee, we talk about the critical needs and how important they are, and I think we need to really start talking about what we need to do to pass a bond. It's gonna take a blue ribbon committee probably, I don't know what they're gonna call it this time, but we sort of need to get the things in place to start looking at long-term. I just wanna make sure two things, that we don't bog our very skeleton administration with additional reports. I know that was an issue, and one of the reasons why Amanda was pushed out, and I wanna make sure that, I mean, I know it's important to get reports, but if it's just for this committee, I just don't think that we should be making our administrators spend hours compiling reports, for this committee alone. If anyone needs additional information or details, I think, you know, you can always reach out to our finance committee, but, I think that we have a very skeleton crew as it is, and, I don't want people having to spend extra time, doing things that are unnecessary. The other thing I would caution, and I know Amanda said this on more than one occasion, that we should not be doing building by building breakdowns, because it's not always, you know, people get a hold of this kind of information and then they compare it to each other, and it's not always an equitable thing. And that, you know, if you look at what Monteith spends as opposed to what Ferry spends, it might not be equal for very different reasons. And when people see that kind of breakdowns, Amanda always said this, and I think John always cautioned us not to do that either, because it's not always a reflection of anything other than each building has different needs.
Okay, Ben?
I think, adding on to what Colleen said, the budget comparison by building is quite frankly not much. It's not worth much. However, what's good, I think Brendan mentioned it, is listing staffing. We had a report that shows teachers, parapro secretaries, administrators, custodians by building. There's no dollars attached, but then you can take the enrollment and you can do a per student staffing ratio. That is very helpful to see, and you have to take into consideration, I'm just gonna
Special programs.
Yeah, special programs or special needs at particular buildings. You can factor those in a subcategory, but that kind of comparison is helpful for North and South. For the 3 middle schools, you can do that. Doing it by dollar amount, in the past, it hasn't done much. They get, I mean, 86, whatever it is, percent of our budget is people. And you can see it very clear from that stand. And that's something easy. No, I don't say it's not easy, because I'm not doing it. It's something we can do. The other thing I think we've got to pull it back up and take some little work in the front end, is the fringe benefit report. That is very helpful to see what the trend's going month by month, breaking it down between all the various categories. I think we can get a small pointed dog working on that and getting it all together.
Thanks, Chris. You guys have anything, any guidance for us?
No, but there's a few good questions that we had that I will look into.
Okay.
I wrote down, and with the great question with the letter, we'll look into that. It's been a little bit since I wrote, we went through the letter, so we'll get some of the
If
detail
you can get that
on
to Chris, and then Chris can get it out to
Yeah,
all of us, that would be
absolutely.
great.
Yep.
Thank you. Now, are you're coming to present to the board
I
next
will be
week?
here next week with Laura.
Okay.
Yep.
We're gonna put you at the beginning of the agenda,
Okay.
so you don't have to sit for 5 hours.
Thank
and
you.
then- So, you get to go home that night. Okay, public comments. Do you have any public comments? Go right ahead.
Lakeitria Felder, Grosse Pointe Park, district parent. Just a question about the letter that you're referencing that came from the state. Is that something that's published on the website under transparency? The letter you just mentioned?
Oh, that was not a letter, that was a letter from Plante Moran on various recommendations, just updates of new legislations coming down from the state, different budgeting from the state.
Is that publicly available?
It'll be-
Yeah.
It'll be attached to the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, we catch it. That's not an issue. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We are adjourned, folks. Thank you.